Welcome to IVF This, episode 44, IVF'ers Like Us with Kait Z. Welcome to IVF This. I'm your host, Emily Ginn. I'm a mother to two beautiful and feral boys. I'm married to my favorite person in the world. I'm a social worker, a life coach, and an IVF warrior. I'm here to teach you how to manage your mind and emotions during your IVF journey, to break free from anxiety and regain control of your life, even in the midst of infertility. I'm going to teach you to say IVF this to how we think about, talk about, and experience infertility. Let's go. Hello, my beautiful friends. I have a really lovely treat for you today as I interviewed a client of mine. It was a lovely treat for me as well because I got to talk to Kait outside of our normal coaching calls, but Kait is one of my clients who has actually already wrapped up her first 13-week block working with me. That is how long I coach for. I coach for 13-week blocks or 3 months. And she opted to continue working with me, which is always an option. I have clients that choose to continue working together. I have clients that don't choose to continue working together, mostly because it just depends on where they're at and what they want to work on. So I recently had this kind of revelation because I get a lot of DMs asking about what coaching is like, what happens, what could I expect, all of these things. So I thought it would be a really great opportunity to share with you directly from one of my clients, like have them tell you guys what it's like to work together. So we talk about the fun that we have, we talk about the work that we do together, and how it's really impacted Kait's life. We talk about how she found me, why she felt like she needed coaching, and why she chose to work with me specifically. It's a really lovely conversation. She's a really lovely individual, and I hope you all enjoy it, and I hope it provides you more insight into what infertility and IVF coaching is, what it is, what it isn't, and how it can be really beneficial for you before, during, or after your journey. I kind of meet my clients wherever they are. You don't have to be starting your IVF journey or already through your IVF journey, right? It doesn't really matter where you are because the things that come up are pretty universal to whatever you're experiencing. So I hope you enjoy that. And I also wanted to remind you guys, if you're not on my email list, please get on as quickly as possible so that you get all the up-to-date information about my upcoming group coaching program. The coaching program is going to launch the second week of October. And to get all the specific details, I want to make sure that you get on the email list. So you can go to my website, www.ivfthiscoaching.com. It's on the homepage about halfway down. It's the free mini class for managing your anxiety, 3 simple steps to managing your anxiety. You put your name and your email in, you get the class, but you also get put on my email list. You can also access the class on my social media bio links, which is at IVF This Coaching, either on Instagram or Facebook. Now, the beauty of the group coaching program is actually this inaugural class is the least expensive offer that I'm ever going to have because I want to make group coaching really accessible to everyone. So there's payment plan options. There's a lot of things that we're going to cover or that I'm going to cover in the email. So I want to make sure that you guys don't miss out on that. So make sure you go to my mini class, the 3 simple steps for managing my anxiety. Again, you can get that on my website, www.ivfthiscoaching.com, or you can access it on my social media links at IVF This Coaching. And I hope to talk to all of you guys very soon. Enjoy this interview. Hi, Kait. I'm so excited to have you. How are you feeling today?
I'm pretty good.
Good. All right, my friend, you're my first client to ever appear on the podcast, and I'm really, really excited to get to talk to you and for other people to hear your experiences. I think the things that we talk about regularly and the things that we've coached on are pretty universal experiences in our community, which is why I think it's so important to have clients on to talk about that and make it real for other people who might be considering coaching. Tell us where you are in your journey, what's going on right now. Give us all the deets on Kait Z.
Sure. So my husband and I have been on this fun journey. For a little over a year and a half, we have had 3 IUIs and 5 transfers after 1 retrieval, and all of them have failed. We have not had any positive pregnancy tests quite yet, but we're not done. We're still going. We are waiting on test results, or we decided to test the rest of the embryos. And we're just kind of playing the waiting game, as is so often the case as part of IVF.
Do you guys have a medical diagnosis? What brought you to the IVF world?
We had been trying on our own for a while, for a couple years, and just hadn't been successful. So we decided to at least go in for a consult. I knew a coworker who had been doing IVF, and through the consults, we decided to go ahead with testing and at least get some indication, but everything was unexplained. So there was no glaring medical diagnosis, which meant there was no easy fix and no easy answers.
Yeah. And I think that's so important for everyone to hear, because even if you're just brand new into the IVF or infertility community, it's very common and kind of culturally understood, and I'm putting understood in quotation marks, that infertility is a woman's problem, right? But a third of infertility is female factor, a third is typically male factor infertility, and the last third, the bucket of yuck, the unexplained infertility. And I think it creates a deeper complexity sometimes for the feelings that are associated with it, because for myself, my husband and I have male and female factor infertility because we're just those high achievers. And so we have a reason. I can point to, I have diminished ovarian reserve. He has low sperm motility, right? Your brain can almost understand anything if there's a reason attached. It can tolerate a lot if there's a reason attached. I would love for you to expand on it, but without that reason, like what comes up for you?
I'm definitely someone who wants to be able to pinpoint the problem and then find the solution. This is our roadmap and it's going to work. And throughout our time with IVF, we have gone through many, many tests, all the vials of blood, all the needles, all the fun stuff. And every test we've done has come back normal, quote unquote normal. And everything looks good, all the responses are good. Just kind of leaves the negative tests as a giant question mark. And I think it's harder on me emotionally, because if it's not a problem, like a physical problem that I can point to, then I feel like it's easier to fall into the trap of it must have been something I did or didn't do. And so I must be at fault somehow for why this isn't working.
Yeah, that actually leads me into my next question, which is, that was kind of where you were when we first met. So tell me a little bit about how you found me and why you decided to contact me.
Okay, this is a story. So one day in not one of my better days, where I was feeling pretty numb about the process. I think we must have just gotten another negative test, or something had just occurred. And I was in kind of IVF mode in the car, which is what I call it when I start searching for sad songs and IVF playlists on Spotify. And Spotify recommended to me one of your episodes. And first off, I just loved the title, because it's absolutely where I was feeling in my journey.
Yes.
And that episode was emotional cushioning. Mm-hmm. And listening to that episode was such a huge moment of revelation for me, because it was like everything you said described perfectly what I was doing or thinking or feeling. And in that moment, I was able to shift from, this is me, this is my fault, this is, I'm judging myself and feeling guilty for not being more positive, and for, starting to even question, did I even want to be a mom? Did I want this enough? And able to understand what my brain was doing in that moment and be able to show myself compassion for that, to move away from like questioning what's wrong with me and judging myself for feeling that way, and being able to forgive myself for feeling that way and explain why I felt that way and that it was okay and normal to feel that way. And in that moment, that was so huge for me that I started listening to all the other podcasts. I think, and I ended up sending you an email just to say, thank you so much for this podcast that you're doing, because literally it has changed my life and my whole outlook on how I'm going through all of this.
Oh, I love that so much. Because at this point we had never spoken.
Yep.
You had just found me. But do you feel like in that moment, just from hearing someone say, you're not crazy, there's not anything wrong with you, this is what's happening, do you feel like it took a little bit of time, or was there a little bit of a loosening already of this I'm doing it wrong?
I think right away there was some loosening. I mean, it's not going to go away 100%. Like all those thoughts are still there, especially the more you go through it, the more negative news you have. So it's not suddenly like I listened to one episode and was cured.
Oh, man.
Darn. But I think the major difference was that in that moment, I shifted from sort of being in my own like isolated space where everything was turned inwards to being able to open up that door a little bit and say, this is some work that I could do. Like, why do I have to stay in this space where it feels awful? I can actually learn more about this and understand what's happening. And through that understanding, forgive myself for feeling that way. So it was a little bit like both. Like there was a lot of work still to do, but it opened that door and allowed that work to be possible.
So good. Yeah, I think I talk a lot about how people just want to share their stories. And for a lot of reason that has to do with, camaraderie and just feeling connected to other people. But I think more often than not, particularly when we're going through any crisis in our life, right? The death of a family member, a massive shift in our expectation of how our life would go, is that you want someone to tell you, or you want to at least hear from someone, you're not doing anything wrong simply because you're doing it differently than you thought you would, or something like that. I love that I talk about incremental shifts and then big shifts. And so you had a little bit of both, it sounds like, which is amazing. Oh, I love that so much. So you found me on the podcast, you sent this email. So what made you decide to get on a call with me? Because I think we did a mini session and then we did a consult. So that first step of scheduling the mini session, what was that like? What is coming to that decision like?
I was very nervous to schedule that call. I think after listening to more episodes and kind of realizing that there was work that could be done, but that it wasn't work that I felt like I was equipped to do on my own. And I think when you're dealing with this much trauma, at some point, you're going to get to this point where you're sort of recognizing that you need help. You need outside help. More than just all the books that you buy and the blogs that you read and the Facebook groups that you join. Like you need someone who knows what they're talking about and is there to help. And I think it was very helpful that I had the option to sign up for sort of the free session just to kind of feel it out and see if it was something that would work. I just remember setting up and then thinking, oh, is she going to know that I'm the person who emailed her? Is she going to think I'm a crazy stalker fan or something? So
I think there was actually a moment where I kind of put the initials together because your email is initials. I think there was a moment and I was like, oh my gosh, it was actually a really wonderful moment. So it was very powerful for me because I had been doing the podcast by that time for about, 4 months. And it's when you first start out, it's like you're talking into the abyss. And, this was one of the first times that I got an echo back. So it was really cool to get to talk to you.
I think it's just comes down to like in that moment, kind of pushed to the point where you're recognizing you need that help, and then having that be an option without a lot of pressure. And, it's simple to set up something and see how it goes, and with no obligation to continue if it's not right for you. But it was pretty obvious right away that it was right for me.
I love that. I still very clearly remember both the mini session and the consult. When you said that you knew pretty quickly, was there something that we talked about where you were like, okay, here we go. This is what we're going to be doing for the next 3 months?
Yes. So I have a tendency to ramble on occasion. And when you responded after I'd kind of gone off on my tangents, and instantly brought the conversation back and like zeroed in on like, so this is what I'm hearing, and this is, where I think we could do some work. And it was so spot on. So I like to say it's because you called me on my crap right away. Right away, it was like, okay, this person isn't going to let me just talk for an hour and, not get any work done, which I had experienced with some others. And so I knew right away. I think it's also because you have such a nice manner. And the more we've worked together, the more we've kind of seen that we're like very similar in personality as well.
Very similar. Okay. I love that so much. Don't tell my husband that I have a nice manner. I think we don't want to get that secret out too loud. I'm just kidding, Vance. I love you. We've now worked together for going on 5 months. Mm-hmm. So tell me what has been the most impactful part of working with a coach?
I think one of the biggest pieces is you have a sounding board for all of this kind of like inner static and turmoil. Your emotions are doing one thing, your thoughts are doing another, and they're clashing all over the place because, like your podcast says, what you're experiencing is trauma and compounded over time. And so even just having someone who's a sounding board for some of that, and then can help you kind of sort through what's happening and explain a little bit behind what's happening or what your brain is trying to do and why, helps sort of straighten out some of that tangle. And also then provides you with tools to sort of do some of that work on your own going forward with practice.
Yeah. When I hired my first coach, the thing that I didn't realize, right? I spent years in social work. I told myself time and time again that I had everything that I need to like figure out whatever it was. And I think that's pretty common, whether you're in like a helping profession or if you've gone to counseling for many years, right? You kind of tell yourself the story that you have, quote unquote, everything you need. And then you find someone who shows you the mirror and shows you where your blind spots are. And I remember for me, it was very impactful. It was like, oh, crap, you saw that too? Oh, is there like a concept or a topic that we cover that really resonated with you or really helped you understand what was happening in your brain?
I'm always going to go back to emotional cushioning because that was the first one. Mm-hmm. And it definitely explained a lot. And we've talked a little bit more about that. But I think it was also just the process we use where we kind of name what we're feeling. And then we're able to sort of dig through and uncover and actually pinpoint the thought behind that and sort of work with that thought. And we're not even like reframing it so much as we're just understanding it and uncovering like that's the pattern and that's kind of what's coming up for you. Another one was when we were talking about the red flag language. That was a big one too.
If you've listened to this podcast, you might have heard me reference red flag language, which is basically, it's like a flag on the play. If you're telling yourself any of the shoulds, have tos, I think I talk a lot about it in the episode called Shoulding on Yourself. But essentially, you want to be super aware of those types of thoughts because 9 times out of 10, I would like to say 10 times out of 10, but I'm not a fortune teller. I can't tell your future. But the vast majority of the time when you're telling yourself those types of phrases, I have to, I need to, I must, I should, you're always going to end up feeling worse. And the thought model, the think, feel, do cycle that I work on, which is what Kait was kind of referring to, how we lay out what you're thinking and how that thought creates your feeling drives your actions. You're always going to get a result from those thoughts. And our thoughts do one of three things when it creates our results in our life. It either mirrors the thought and the result, like I have too much to do. And so you're probably going to be locked in overwhelm. And from overwhelm, you're probably not going to do much, which means that your thought of I have too much to do is going to be a result too, because you haven't done anything. Or it will be the opposite, right? I have to go exercise. And maybe that feels like an obligation. So from that feeling of obligation, maybe you're doing a little bit of rebellion, which is something that I'm very familiar with. And so you're not going to exercise. And then the other one is you're going to create more evidence for whatever it is you believe. And this was a big one, I think, for you, was a lot of the belief around time scarcity is something that we've talked quite a bit about. Like, we're wasting time. We don't have much time. And those thoughts for you have always created this sense of urgency, of fear. And so when you're kind of locked into that fear and urgency, then you're going to go through and catalog all of the ways that you're wasting time, all of the time that's gone by, right? So you're building evidence in your brain to support that belief. And I love that you mentioned that we don't have to change the thought. Louder for the people in the back. We don't have to change our thoughts. We just have to know what the thoughts we already have, what is being created in our life, right? We can create a better, more peaceful, calmer experience, even in the craptastic journey of infertility. But we have to be aware of what the negative thoughts, what those thoughts that we don't really want, what that is creating for us. We got to be aware of those first, and then we can get to what I call intentional thought creation. And that's kind of where we're much more in the path of right now, because we did a lot of cleaning up, which is what we always do. Tell me a little bit about what that process has been like, going from what we call unintentional thoughts to intentional thoughts.
I think it's important to know that it's not always going to be a perfect sort of linear process. That, even if you get really, really good at recognizing the thought and working on a more intentional thought, we talk about the brain likes PowerPoint presentations with all of the evidence to support the negative thought or the thought that's there. And you're still going to have days that are like that. You start to become better at recognizing when that happens. And it feels less like you are sort of enslaved by those thoughts that before, we started working, before I found the podcast, those thoughts felt more like truths. Like that was just the narrative. That was the truth of how things were. And now I can identify them better as thoughts and address them in a way that doesn't have me sort of trapped in that space.
Yes. I'm so glad that you at the top mentioned that it's not going to look perfect. It's not going to look linear. It's one week we can have like a really, really powerful session and go through a lot of stuff and get to intentional thoughts. And the next week you could be in the throes of depression, and we're working on more processing feelings and how we can sit with our emotions and process through them. And so, yeah, it looks different. I always equate it to putting a key into a lock and the pins just kind of pop up. Now, I don't know what the magic pins are for every person's brain. I don't know necessarily the magic combination, but it happens. I can almost set my clock to around the 5th session. The concepts start to come together, and really that essence of what you're talking about, that my thoughts are actually optional. They haven't felt like that. No one's ever told me that. No one's ever shown me that before. So it's a little bit of a tough sell at the beginning, but you truly can choose how you want to think about something and how you want to feel about something. And I think that, which is the reason that I loved coaching, the reason I got into coaching, is because that is a truest form of empowerment, I believe. Okay, so I have a favorite memory of us working together, but I want to know, what has been your favorite memory of us working together?
I think it's Probably one of the more entertaining memories is when I was like halfway through a statement and then I backtracked. And I think I even said out loud, "Oh, she's going to call me on that." Because I think it was like a red flag language or something in there. And I was like, "Oh, wait, can't say that." And, even in mid sentence, had to go backwards and rethink, reframe the thought like mid speech.
Yes. I love getting to do that because most of us, when we talk, we just talk. There's not really a filter. And so how we actually think about ourselves always comes out in how we speak. Especially when we first started working together, that would happen a lot because you caught on very quickly that I am like a shark in the water, just sniffing out the chum. And the moment I find it, I'm like, oh, okay, so we're going to talk about this then. And I can always see it in your face. It's almost like, damn it, she got me. My favorite memory of us working together is anytime, this is just universally something that I love, anytime that we start to talk about something that historically probably would have made you feel uncomfortable or you didn't want to look there, because of the trust that we have for each other. It's like a reluctant, well, I don't want to go there, but I know I need to, right? When we first started working together, it was almost like, I'm going to cordon off this section of my brain. We're not going to touch that. That's like museum quality thoughts. That's going to stay over there behind the rope line. And we can talk about this. And just kind of unpacking and your willingness to be coached, which is a huge part. I think it allows people to understand that the phrase that I use is all roads lead to Rome. So how we do one thing is how we do everything. And so I guess overall, my favorite memory of you is how willing you are to go to places that you might not want to. We don't have to stay there, but you're just like, oh, okay, I'll do it. All in service of overcoming them, of feeling better. And then any sidebar that both of our ADHD brains come up with. We had a very good conversation about Korean pop stars, which was wonderful. We do have a lot of fun during coaching sessions. I will say that I try to keep it as heavy as the topics that we talk about. We try and keep it light. We try and keep it fun and relatable, which is probably my favorite part. Okay, here's the big question. What advice do you have for your fellow IVFers? The veterans like yourself, the newbies coming in, the people who are just kind of window shopping fertility treatments. What would be some advice you have for them?
Well, firstly, I would say if you're listening to this podcast, you're already taking some really good steps to keep going. Everyone's journey is very different. Some are like successful right away, and others like myself apparently take a lot longer. And I guess what I really want to say is you're not alone. Whatever your situation might be, whatever support network you might have, and if you don't have one, I highly recommend that you seek out some, because this is not something that was meant to be done alone, and it's really heavy. Mm-hmm. And having others that can help you carry that is really critical. So definitely you're not alone. Keep going and do what works for you and what you need. And it's okay to put yourself first sometimes.
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you ended on that one, because I firmly believe we have to fight for ourselves with the same ferocity, with the same intention, with the same desire that we fight for our families, that we fight for those future babies, because ultimately we have to live with ourselves. I'm the only brain I get. So I have to live with myself for the rest of my life. Kait has to live with herself for the rest of her life. So let's make it hospitable in that brain. Let's make it a team experience rather than an adversarial experience, which I think most of us have. I love that so much. Kait, this has just been, it's always a pleasure to get to hang out with you. But I can't thank you enough for being on the podcast. I know right before we started recording, you were like, it's this weird, surreal, full circle moment, which I absolutely love because it often is that. Is there any last nuggets that you want to share before we head out?
Just thank you for doing what you're doing and making these podcast episodes that talk about topics that all of us experience that not a lot of people talk about, and making those experiences okay.
As a not former Chick-fil-A employee, it is absolutely my pleasure. I love it so much. In fact, doing the podcast every week is probably, once I get past the kicking and screaming of actually having to sit down and do it, it is my favorite part of the week. So you're very welcome. And I'm so glad that it led us to each other, to our friendship and our relationship and all of that. So, all right, my beautiful friends. So take a note from Kait, just taking the chance of doing the mini session, get an opportunity to see if there's anything that we can work together with. And who knows, it could be a one-off. I've had those, or it can be a lasting friendship, relationship, coaching ship. It's amazing stuff. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today, Kait. Have a great day.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of IVF This. If you like what you've heard, click subscribe and follow to make sure you don't miss an episode. And if you want to learn more, head over to www.ivfthiscoaching.com to learn how to work together.